약자라든가 뭐 세월호의 희생자라든가 뭐 아니면 그런 위안부의 문제 뭐 그 외에 또 우리 사회가 강압적으로 막 그 지배적인 이데올로기 뭐 누구나 다 성공해야 되고 잘 돼야 되고 그런 이데올로기 때문에 희생당한 이야기들이 굉장히 많은데 작품들이 좋은 작품들이 굉장히 많거든요. 그래서 앞으로 계속 그런 작품들을 더 번역해보고 싶습니다.
In our headlines on this Friday, April 25th, here in capital Seoul, South Korea and the US reach a broad consensus on the framework for future discussions on tariffs and trade with the aim of hammering out a package deal by early July. Meanwhile, the funeral of Pope Francis takes place this coming Saturday, that is April 26th, at St. Peter's Square in Vatican City, where he made his final appearance on Easter Sunday. And South Korea and Japan celebrate 60 years of diplomatic relations this year with a host of events throughout the year, including a reenactment of diplomatic messaging practices. We start over in the U.S., where top finance and trade officials from Seoul and Washington met on Thursday for their much-anticipated talks on tariffs. Our Hampyeong covers these talks.
South Korea and the United States have agreed to produce a package of deals to remove new U.S. tariffs before the July 8 deadline, when the 90-day pause on reciprocal tariffs is lifted. This was discussed by South Korea's Deputy Prime Minister Choi Sang-mok and Trade Minister An Dok-gun, alongside U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer during a high-level meeting in Washington on Thursday local time. Seoul's Trade Ministry said in a statement that it requested exemptions from reciprocal tariffs and offered cooperation on shipbuilding and energy. Following the meeting, Finance Minister Choi said the two sides agreed to aim for a deal by early July and explained they will hold further discussions on 4 key areas of mutual interest: tariffs and non-tariff measures, economic security, investment cooperation, and currency policy.
We focus particularly on the automobile sector, which faces the greatest negative impact.
Choi also said they asked for understanding from the U.S. as the negotiation process could be affected by Korea's political schedule and the upcoming presidential election. He added that the two sides agreed to discuss this in detail when Greer visits South Korea to take part in the APEC Trade Ministers meeting, scheduled to take place for 2 days starting May 15th. Unlike trade talks between the U.S. and Japan, Thursday's meeting between Seoul and Washington did not include a discussion on the issue of sharing the cost of American troops in Korea. In fact, Trump said in a White House press briefing on Thursday that the military will not be subject to any deals, signaling that the issue of U.S. troop costs will be discussed separately, apart from tariff negotiations, in what pundits in Seoul believe the U.S. could be taking a two-track approach. Meanwhile, Besant also told reporters that the two countries had a very successful meeting, without disclosing further details on the talks.
We may be moving faster than I thought, and we will be talking technical terms as early as next week as we reach an agreement on understanding as soon as next week. So South Koreans came early, they came with their A game, and we will see if they follow through on that.
South Korea, which faces 25% U.S. reciprocal tariffs, plans to leverage its shipbuilding capabilities in upcoming tariff negotiations. Trade Minister An told Parliament earlier that the Trump administration has expressed great interest in cooperation in shipbuilding and said this will become an important negotiating card for Korea.
The U.S. is in urgent need of support in the shipbuilding sector, as you mentioned, while Korea possesses the world's most advanced capacity in shipbuilding. Moving forward, if Korea and the U.S. expand cooperation in shipbuilding and other technology and industrial sectors, it could serve as a kind of channel to broaden discussion into other areas, leading to favorable negotiations.
Eyes are now on whether the two countries will be able to reach a fruitful deal that will exempt South Korea from higher levies. 배은지, Arirang News.
Also in Washington, D.C. next week, South Korean and U.S. officials will meet for defense talks. Now, according to the defense ministry here, the two-day Korea-U.S. integrated defense dialogue will begin next Thursday, that is May 1st. Topping the agenda is North Korea's nuclear threat. Since its launch back in the year 2011, this defense dialogue has been a key forum focused on bolstering security partnership. Come June 2nd, the Trump administration will reportedly be hosting an LNG summit in Alaska. According to the New York Times, the administration is hoping to secure tangible investment commitments from its trade partners, including South Korea and Japan, for its Alaska LNG project. The U.S. in recent times has been highlighting its energy exports as one option in tariff discussions with major trading partners. Shipments from China to the U.S. have reportedly shrunk substantially as Beijing continues to contradict the U.S. leader's claims that tariff talks with China are on track. Our Moon Hye-ryun has the latest.
The global container shipping industry is showing early signs of strain amid U.S.-China trade tensions. According to the Wall Street Journal, Hapag-Lloyd, the world's fifth largest shipping company, said bookings for U.S.-bound containers from China have dropped by nearly a third since the U.S. announced steep tariff hikes earlier this month. In response, demand has surged for shipments from Southeast Asian countries, including Thailand and Cambodia, signaling that businesses are rerouting supply chains. A company spokesperson said a substantial volume of cargo from China is being held back, and smaller vessels may be used due to the decline. With the U.S. imposing a 10% blanket tariff on most partners and up to 145% on Chinese goods, some Chinese exporters have paused shipments altogether. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump has continued to insist that negotiations with China are ongoing, claiming that he held trade talks on Thursday morning. Speaking to reporters at the White House, Trump said that the contents of the trade talks may be revealed later, but did not elaborate further. Trump had suggested the day before that the U.S. was actively negotiating with China, raising hopes that a deal to substantially lower tariffs on Chinese imports could be imminent. However, Beijing dismissed Trump's claims of trade talks between the world's two largest economies. According to the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson, Trump's claims are fake news.
This is fake news. As far as I know, China and the United States have not held consultations or negotiations on the tariff issue, let alone reached an agreement. The tariff war was initiated by the United States, and China's attitude is consistent and clear. If you want to fight, we will fight to the end. If you want to talk, the door is open. Dialogue and negotiation must be equal, respectful and mutually beneficial.
While Trump had told reporters that there were talks between the two countries, his Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, said no formal negotiations had taken place. 문혜련, Arirang News.
On the political frontier, partisan primaries are gaining greater momentum with expectations for the final candidates representing the two main rival parties to be named within the next few days. I have our correspondent Kim Do-yeon live on the line with more. Do-yeon, welcome back. So what's the latest at the Democratic Party?
Connie, the Democratic Party of Korea's primary is nearing its end, and the last debate before the DP's candidate is finalized will be live at 10 p.m. tonight. Utilizing the 90-minute debate, the three candidates will debate over various issues. During the day, the candidates kept themselves busy with campaign work. Frontrunner Lee Jae-myung was in Jeollanam-do province to boost his support in the party's stronghold, with the region's voting still open. He met with people in agricultural business and pledged to make the nation's agro industry globally strong. Both Kim Kyung-soo and Kim Dong-yeon joined the celebration for the 7th anniversary of the Panmunjom Declaration earlier in the afternoon at the National Assembly Library. The DP electors voting for the Jeollado provinces will close on Saturday, while the capital, Gangwon-do province, and Jeju will close on Sunday, which is also when the convention will be held to name the primary's winner and officially kick off the presidential campaign for the party.
Right, I see. Do-yeon, what about the People Power Party? I understand the verbal battles is still on.
That's right, Sonny. Today's one-on-one debates featured Han Dong-un and Hong Jun-pyo, who chose each other as partners, and it began at 4 p.m. and runs until 7. The two are clashing over how they view former President Yoon's declaration of martial law and over who is more competitive against DP's likely candidate, Lee Jae-myung. Meanwhile, speculation grows over whether acting President Han Duck-soo will join the race. All four PPP primary candidates, including An Cheol-soo, who joined this morning, have now pledged to merge their campaigns with the acting president's if he does run. Initially, only Kim Moon-soo supported the idea, even welcoming the idea of the acting president running. The remaining three were not in favor of him running, but now they say they'll unite their camps if he does. Some PPP supporters are also in favor, although the acting president himself remains silent on the matter. And keep in mind, the primary will be decided 50-50 between PPP electors and an open survey, increasing the weight of party members' votes. That's all for now. Reporting live from the National Assembly, this is Kim Do-yeon.
Dozens of world leaders will join tens of thousands of mourners at St. Peter's Square in Vatican City tomorrow, that is Saturday, for the funeral of Pope Francis. Our Joseon has more.
The funeral mass for Pope Francis, who passed away on Monday, will be held at 10 a.m. local time on Saturday, April 26th, in St. Peter's Square in the heart of the Vatican. His body was moved to St. Peter's Basilica for public mourning, and in just 2 days, more than 90,000 people have paid their respects. On the first day, there were larger crowds than expected, with people waiting more than 8 hours. The Vatican extended visiting hours on that day until 5:30 a.m. to welcome them. It is expected that more than 250,000 mourners will pay their respects before the final day of public visiting, and an even larger crowd is anticipated for the funeral mass. The funeral mass will be presided over by Cardinal Giovanni Battista Re, the leader of the College of Cardinals, with cardinals, bishops, and priests from around the world jointly officiating. In accordance with the Pope's wishes, the ceremony will be a simple and modest one, significantly simplified from traditional papal funerals. Instead of the ornate, triple-layered coffin used in the past, his body will be placed in a single, simple wooden coffin. A scroll documenting the achievements of his papacy, along with coins and medals, will be sealed inside. Many world leaders will also gather for Pope Francis' funeral. U.S. President Donald Trump and his wife Melania, Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Prince William of the United Kingdom, French President Emmanuel Macron and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will be present. South Korea is also sending a delegation led by the country's culture minister Yoo In-chun. Migrants and refugees who are especially close to the Pope's heart during his lifetime will also attend. After the funeral mass, the Pope will be laid to eternal rest at the Santa Maria Maggiore Basilica, a place he visited often and held dear. The funeral procession will slowly travel about 6 kilometers through central Rome, passing historic landmarks, including the Colosseum. Joseon, Arirang News.
Back on the local front, Seoul has shared much concern over a sea structure built by Beijing off the west coast of the Korean peninsula. The concern was conveyed to Chinese officials during dialogue between the two governments here in Seoul earlier this week. The Chinese delegation claimed the structure was built for fish farming and invited South Korean authorities to confirm for themselves. Starting 2018 until 2024, 3 structures have been set up in the provisional maritime zone, where the two countries' exclusive economic zones overlap, fueling fears that China may be seeking territorial rights. China has launched its Shenzhou 20 mission with 3 astronauts to the Tiangong space station late Thursday afternoon. This latest mission marks the nation's 15th manned space flight. About 7 hours after liftoff, the rocket docked at the space station. The 3 astronauts on board will spend 6 months at the station conducting spacewalks and field experiments. They replace the Shenzhou 19 crew members who have been at the station for 175 days and are scheduled to return to Earth on April 29th. Russia launched an alarming attack against Ukraine in the early hours of Thursday amid U.S.-led efforts to secure a ceasefire, prompting a rare rebuke from U.S. President Donald Trump. Our Ian Jin reports.
In the early hours of Thursday local time, Russia conducted a massive combined missile and drone attack on Kyiv, killing at least 12 people and injuring over 90. The strikes, which began around 1 a.m., targeted multiple districts and caused significant damage to residential buildings and vehicles. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called the assault one of Moscow's most outrageous, while officials reported that it involved ballistic missiles. The country's interior minister said that apart from the Kyiv area, 7 other regions were targeted in the mass attack. The attack marks the deadliest assault on the capital since last July and comes amid heightened tension over negotiations to end the ongoing conflict. On Thursday, U.S. President Donald Trump, in a rare move, criticized Russian President Vladimir Putin, urging him to stop such attacks, adding that Putin demonstrated very bad timing and that the attacks were not necessary. Trump had said on Wednesday that he believed Russia was ready for a peace deal with Ukraine. He also lashed out at Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, saying he was harder to deal with than expected, accusing him of prolonging the war by refusing to surrender the Russia-occupied Crimean Peninsula as part of a possible deal. He also said that Russia had made a pretty big concession to end the war by not taking the whole country. But Ukraine and much of Europe have fiercely pushed back, arguing that Russia holding back on a land grab is hardly a concession. And Zelensky reiterated that any peace agreement, including Russia's demand to keep control of Crimea, is a red line for Ukraine. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said further discussions were planned for the weekend to finalize a peace deal. How things develop in the next few days will be crucial for the future direction of U.S.-led peace talks. Ian Jin, Arirang News.
Up next, we share with you an elaborate reenactment of a past diplomatic mission from Korea to Japan as we celebrate 60 years of formal bilateral ties this year. Our correspondent Song Yoo-jin files this report.
일본국으로 향할 상사는 전하께 어명을 받으라.
This is a recreation of the Joseon Tongsinsa, the diplomatic mission sent from Korea to Japan between the 17th and 19th centuries. The word Tongsinsa means envoys of communication built on trust. Between 1607 and 1811, a total of 12 missions were dispatched at the request of Japan's shogunate government. Their purpose was to restore diplomatic relations after Japan attacked Korea in the late 16th century. Each year, the Busan Cultural Foundation brings this historic journey back to life. This year's event carries more special meaning, marking the 60th anniversary of the normalization of diplomatic ties between South Korea and Japan.
Today's ceremony reenacts the moment the royal order is handed to the lead envoy, the Jongsa, before the mission sets off. This year we are recreating the 1763 mission from during King Yongjo's reign, an event being revived for the first time in 16 years.
Every Tongsinsa mission begins with the appointment of the three key envoys, Jongsa, Busa, and Jongsa관, the core of the 300 to 500 delegation. This year, the role of chief envoy Jongsa is being played by Shin Yun-chan, the mother of the late Lee Soo-hyun, a Korean student who died in Tokyo in 2001 while trying to save a Japanese man who had fallen onto train tracks.
People call Japan a close but distant neighbor, but reflecting on my experience, it's always been a close country, for example, through family and work. Even though there are political tensions, cultural exchanges like this show how we can move forward together.
Following the appointment ceremony in Seoul, the procession travels south to Busan, where it will board a vessel modeled after the original Tongsinsa ships and set sail for Japan. 2 weeks later, by mid-May, the vessel is set to arrive in Osaka. For those unable to follow the journey in person, the Seoul Museum of History is hosting a special exhibition introducing the Goodwill Mission. It features over 100 artifacts, including diplomatic records inscribed on the UNESCO Memory of the World Register.
These missions were re-established after the devastation of war at a time when Japan was still seen as a bitter enemy. And yet Korea chose diplomacy. They reflect the desire to stabilize society and preserve peace, even with a former foe. That message of cultural dialogue is what we wanted to emphasize in this exhibition.
Centuries ago, Korean envoys sailed not just across seas, but across political divides, guided by the pursuit of peace. And today, as Korea and Japan continue navigating a complex relationship, the spirit of the Tongsinsa reminds us that history, when honored, can still guide us toward a more thoughtful future. 송유진, Arirang News.
And now, for those of you here in Seoul who have yet to make weekend plans, how about a trip to a beautiful butterfly festival in the southern part of the country? Our Park Go-nu was there.
Busy and colorful wings flutter through the air, signaling the full arrival of spring. And there's no better place to experience it than at South Korea's biggest butterfly festival in Hampyeong County, Jeollanam-do Province. Celebrating its 27th edition, Hampyeong Butterfly Festival showcases around 200,000 butterflies of nearly 20 different species. Among them, the Korean tiger swallowtail has been named the Butterfly of the Year. Caterpillars, larvae, and other fascinating insects also add to the festival's charm, making it a rare opportunity to enjoy nature up close. After the festival kicked off on Friday, people from all over the country visited to enjoy not just the winged insects, but the vibrant scenes of spring.
My friends and I are all over 70, but we've been here since early this morning, feeling as excited as if we were 18 again. There are so many flowers, butterflies, and even people. It's such a joy to be here.
It's really fun to see butterflies I've only seen in books. There are so many kinds like the cabbage white butterfly that I know, and I actually got to see them today. I hope more people can come and enjoy them too.
The festival isn't just for observing, as it's filled with intriguing activities to encounter butterflies, including feeding them using floral bouquets. Nabiya, Nabiya. One of the greatest things you can try here is releasing a butterfly, so I'll be trying it myself. As I do it, I'll be sending off my greatest wishes on their wings, hoping they'll spark a new, beautiful butterfly effect. Now go, fly away. While butterfly populations are in decline globally, especially down by 22% in the US over the past 2 decades, Hampyeong has worked hard to keep its ecosystem thriving.
Instead of collecting butterflies from the wild, we raise them using selected breeding stock. To thrive, butterflies need host plants for caterpillars and nectar plants for adults. And this clean and natural area of Hampyeong offers both in abundance.
He stressed that the combination of natural resources, expertise, and sustainable practices is making Hampyeong an ideal place for both the butterflies and the festival. Offering visitors a colorful spring escape with butterflies galore, the festival runs through May 6. Park Go-nu, Arirang News, Hampyeong.
The hot summer-like weather took a step back today. The cold air came down overnight and the temperature in Seoul dropped to the single digits this morning to just 7 degrees Celsius. Even in the middle of the day, most areas were 1 to 7 degrees lower than yesterday. These mild conditions will continue until early next week. Meanwhile, the atmosphere is very dry as the clear weather continues for days. A dry weather advisory is currently in place in most parts of the eastern parts of the country and the Gyeongsang-do provinces. The atmosphere is expected to get drier and drier as there will be no rain for the time being. Tomorrow, Chuncheon will start off at 3 degrees, Gwangju and Daegu at 7 degrees. Daily highs will move up to 20 degrees in Seoul, 24 degrees in Gyeongju. This weekend will be perfect to enjoy outdoor activities with clear skies. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session, and today we touch upon the latest on tariff talks between Seoul and Washington.
전기 요거 막힌 거 확인하느라고.
이 작은 거 하나가 너무 신기해요. 모든 걸 다 제가 할 수 있다라는 게.
도락해서 좋고요. 또 화재 위험성도 없고 끄고 켜는 게 일단은 쉬워요. 누르기만 하면 돼요. 그래서 다 좋습니다.
지금까지는 전기를 아낀다는 것이 전원 코드를 수동으로 뽑거나 또 전등 스위치 끄는 것들이 사실 불편하고 귀찮아서 잘 안 하게 되거든요. 근데 저희 시스템은 이런 것들을 자동화해서 전기료를 대폭 절감하고 또 화재 예방 역할도 하고 또 온실가스 감축도 됩니다. 또한 아낀 전기를 판매해서 보상을 얻을 수 있는 국가제도인 DR에도 참여가 가능한데요. 그리고 ESG 경영에도 기여할 것으로 보고 있습니다.
저희가 금융업무에 사용하는 전산기기가 많아 전기 사용량이 많은 편입니다. 건물 건축 후 태양광 시설을 설치하여 전기료 절감을 하고 있으며 근본의 추가 금융기관 에너지 솔루션을 도입하여 에너지 절감함으로써 가장 손쉽게 온실가스 감축을 위해 노력하고 있습니다.
자발적인 탄소 감축 시장의 확대를 위해 중소기업이나 소규모 단체에 적용시킬 수 있는 탄소 발생량 및 탄소 감축량의 측정 방법을 개발하고 있으며 특히 재단에서 운영하는 기후성과 평가 및 탄소 감축 인증은 각 기업들이 자신들의 탄소 배출량의 현재 상황을 파악하여 기후위기에 적극적으로 대응하고 동참하도록 돕고 있습니다.
제가 갖고 있는 꿈은 국민 보급형 에너지 전략 시스템을 만들어서 저렴한 가격의 에너지 시스템을 보급하고 또 국가 제도에 부응하는 에너지 관리 시스템을 만들어서 국가 에너지 수요 효율화에 기여하고 싶습니다. 나는 전기를 아끼는 그리너입니다.
Gateway to Korea, simply
K-pop.
I'm your Simply MC Tae of AB6. 반갑습니다.
And I'm your special MC Jelly of Eunice. It's so nice to see you all. 자, 킥이다. 따따따라라라따. 따따따라라라. 한입 더 swish. 넘쳐버려 heaven.
I wanna see more to Mars. 목소리 없이 몸을 던져 go 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 go. I get here now. 그래서 끝까지 make it shine. 선을 그건 너의 이름. 내 안에 모든 시와 소설은 너로 수놓아진 얘기들. Look everything I do, everything I do. 다음 찾아가 우리 1, 2, 3, 4 watch out when we the coin. Shut up, we gonna make some noise. The coin.
Then this week, Simply K-pop.
Gateway to Korea,
Don't miss out.
It was very important for Korean people during that time to get their freedom back.
South Korea and the US have reached a broad consensus on the framework for future discussions on tariffs and trade, with the aim of hammering out a package deal by early July. With more on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective for this Friday, April 25th here in Seoul. I'm Min San-hee. Top South Korean finance and trade officials sat down with the U.S. counterparts for talks on tariffs in Washington, D.C. on Thursday. And for details on those discussions and more, I have Rui Valdez with Spanish news agency EFE Spain here in the studio. Rui, welcome back.
Nice to be here, San-hee.
I also have Professor Oh Jun-seok at Sookmyung Women's University joining this session virtually. Professor Oh, as always, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Good to see you, Sunny.
Right, we will start here in the studio. Rui, let's begin with details about the 2+2 meeting between South Korea and the U.S. over in Washington, D.C. on Thursday.
Yeah, we can say that these talks opened with urgency and an important deadline. Basically, what they came up with, well, first of all, the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Industry, and they met their counterparts of the U.S. and the main objective was to find a way to eliminate or get exemptions related to the reciprocal tariffs, but also the sectoral tariffs that were imposed to South Korea. The agenda, or what they reached, is that by July 8th, that is when the pause ends with, for these reciprocal tariffs, they will come up with something called the July package. And in this package, it will be like the result of negotiations that will take into account tariff and non-tariff measures, economic security, investment cooperation, and currency policy. This means that through this package, the main aim is, at least in the side of South Korea, is to get an exemption fully of both types of tariffs, not only one. So as we know, the post tariffs are the 25% reciprocal tariffs in different sectors, but there were also another ones that were already active in automobiles and auto parts. And the main concern that South Korea expressed was in the automotive industry. South Korea expressed that this sector is the one that costs the more economically, and they will try to focus the elaboration of this package in this sector too.
Right. That being said, Professor, what were your takeaways from the 2+2 meeting between the U.S. and South Korea?
The good news is Finance Minister Che and Trade Minister An, you pronounce quite well, An Dok-kun, sat down for talks finally in Washington with U.S. Treasury Secretary and U.S. Trade Representative. In two respects, I could find this importance of 2+2 talks. First, it's a start for the table setting of mutual trade and investment talks. As Mr. Roy mentioned, a package deal. Technically, trade-related talks can be divided into two phases, consultation phase and negotiation phase. Consultation phase aims mainly at building and restoring trust processes and setting agendas to develop dialogue further. Then, under a given condition of fixed agendas, negotiation phase follows as a phase two. In this end, 2+2 talks was sending signal for the start of consultation, and then it will go further to the negotiation phase. To gain confidence from Washington, Seoul needs to pursue a bilateral trade balance and try to remove non-tariff barriers. It should drive home its contribution to the U.S. economy. As per agendas of so-called July package, we need to concentrate on the solution for a trade deficit, which might be balanced by investment surplus. Korea's U.S. investment amounted to 96.2% of its U.S. trade surplus annually, on average from 2017 to 2020. This can also be regarded as reinvestment of trade surplus in the U.S. From 2021 to 2024. The reinvestment portion reached up to 71.4%. Secondly, now comes the grand shift from WTO to White House. Ever since 1995, with the advent of WTO, multilateralism is the basic standard of international trade. Therefore, the WTO has been the center of economic diplomacy around the world, which President Trump really hated this situation long before and want to return to bilateralism or related parties, country-to-country basis negotiation. The United States has even posed contribution to the World Trade Organization as Trump's administration's ramp up effort to cut government spending. As time goes, the spotlight of economic diplomacy make a grand shift from WTO to White House.
Right. And against that backdrop, Acting President Han Duck-soo, prior to the actual 2+2 talks, spoke about the possibility of a win-win solution with regard to tariffs and trade. That being said, Rui, what has been the broader response to the latest talks between Seoul and Washington?
Right. This is when it gets a little bit tricky. So while there is optimism that these talks reach some kind of agreement, the problem is mainly that in June 3rd, we're going to celebrate presidential elections in South Korea, which means that whatever it is that was established in these talks could be at risk because we don't know what the new government will do, right, after this, and also we don't know the political turmoil that will precede the elections. So mostly the pundits are worried about that part. In the other hand, since right now South Korea has an interim government, they think that especially in energy and defense, it's going to be hard to deliver binding commitments because these are more sensitive sectors and you cannot make long-term agreements when the government is going to be changed really soon, no? So that's mainly the concern. And also, there's a difference in tone. What they are interpreting is that the U.S. seems rushed in getting the agreement and building this package. But if you see, for example, the press release that was released today with the comments of Choi Sang-mok of the Ministry of Finance, it's very cautious, and it doesn't use the same language that the officers of U.S. have been using. So, for example, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that the meeting was very successful and that South Korea brought their A game, but the finance minister only said that it was a good starting point. So you can start comparing the way and the tone, and it does seem that there are some discrepancies there. So basically, there's little optimism, but there's also caution because of the presidential elections and other factors.
Right, the uncertainty here with regard to the political arena. That being said, Professor O, what would you highlight as perhaps 3 immediate tasks for South Korea following these latest talks?
I guess even though the consultation phase starts, but it will not be easy in the future. More than anything else, 90 days pause of reciprocal tariff should be paid more attention than imposing tariff itself. The White House wants to and then give us time. A Korean government and business efforts and cooperation from the political sectors they have to have a collaboration. When it comes to top 3 priorities to be considered now, I might be brief like this. First, preparing investment proposal for balancing trade. In this sense, Korea could offer to make investment in strategically infrastructure and technology to enhance the level of competitiveness, particularly in key sectors like semiconductors, as well as shipbuilding and LNG. Though the economic feasibility could be a matter of concern, it could try to build up U.S. trust by making progress in shipbuilding and finding ways to participate in a project to develop Alaska's natural gas resources. And secondly, reinforcing U.S. alliance based on mutually beneficial economic safety, as well as bolstering defense capability as a package deal. In 2023, Korea ranked the first country among foreign countries that create the most jobs in the U.S. through foreign direct investment into the U.S. Lastly, as to the reformation of global supply chain, we need to focus much more on regional diplomacy and try to cooperate to foster a more stable and prosperous Indo-Pacific region, especially through initiatives with ASEAN countries. There are some headwinds from the tariff war Trump triggered, but for now, it is best to persuade Washington to make a deal with trade and investment collectively. It is not a good idea to trade and security separately.
Right, and talking about the headwinds triggered by the Trump administration's tariffs, Rui, the International Monetary Fund has shared some pessimistic projections about the global economy for this year. Could you walk us through the IMF's latest growth outlooks?
Yeah, according to these outlooks, global growth has taken a big hit, and tariffs are in the center of that storm. Starting globally, the IMF cut down by 0.5 percentage point their perspective of global growth. So right now it's at 2.8%. Regarding the US, it was the biggest decrease among all the advanced economies. The new forecast is 1.8%, and it decreased from 2.7%. The other important thing regarding US is the IMF is forecasting or is calculating a 40% probability of a US recession this year, which is also an increase comparing to the previous estimates. When we go to South Korea, it's also hit especially hard. This makes sense with what we have been discussing in other panels, that as expected, the economies that are more related to the supply chains connected to US are the ones that are going to suffer more, especially the ones that focus on exports like South Korea. So based on that, the IMF cut by 1 percentage point from 2 to 1% the perspective for yearly growth for this year. For South Korea. And it names the reciprocal tariffs of Trump, plunging exports, and domestic political instability related with the impeachment of Yoon Suk-yeol. Still, the OECD and the Bank of Korea make a little bit more optimistic forecasts, around 1.5% of growth for this year, but some pundits say that those calculations might be a little bit too optimistic. Regarding China, surprisingly, and also in line with what we have been discussing, that China has a stronger domestic economy, which makes it a little bit less sensible to all this trade war that is going on right now. So it was cut, the perspective of growth, but from 4.6 to 4%, which is much less compared to the countries I just mentioned. And you can see the Eurozone was trimmed 0.8%, and the UK was downgraded to 1.1%. So in a final note, one of the IMF officers says that the region that is most vulnerable to all this trade war is actually the Asia-Pacific region. So he suggests countries like Japan and South Korea to reinforce their domestic economies or consumption, and also to favor intra-Asian trade instead of in other regions.
Right, and staying on with that pessimistic tone, Rune, I believe findings back on Thursday showed the Korean economy contracted the first quarter of this year. What have pundits been saying about the causes of this particular contraction?
Exactly. So the new result, or the recent result, is that the BOK revealed that South Korea economy contracted by 0.2% quarter to quarter and 0.1% compared to the first quarter of last year. The causes that the pundits are pointing out are political instability related also to the recent impeachment of Yoon Suk-yeol and all the turmoil that came with it, the weakening of domestic demand, construction and investment slowdowns, and of course tariff uncertainty and export woes because of this. So this also follows in the line of what we have talked with of the concerns of the IMF. One of the main points is that the policies related to tariffs imposed by the US, they have been creating such an uncertainty that it's very hard to forecast what's going to happen. So you cannot give optimistic views about it, and especially, as we mentioned, in an economy, in an export-led economy like South Korea. And finally, an interesting note is also the unexpected shock caused by the fires in South Korea. The recent fires is mainly in Gyeongsangbuk-do that because of the scale of these fires and because of the cost of recovery of all this land that was destroyed. So with all those things taken into account, they think that that's why the first quarter resulted in a contraction.
Right, a number of domestic challenges then. Professor, exports for the first 20 days of April fell on year, according to the latest findings. Could you share with us a bit more details about this particular decline in exports? And is this trend, Professor, likely to continue? And if that is the case, what can Korea do to ease it?
Yes, it's likely to continue for the time being, even though seasonality pattern of trade being considered, it's very apparent that tariff impact put Korean economy at risk of negative growth in the first quarter. 20 days of April declined by 5.2% compared to the same period of last year. The decline in export came after Trump enacted 25% tariff on aluminum, steel, and auto imports. Car, steel, and other type of shipment fell 6.5% and 8.7%. Overall export from Korea to the U.S. declined by 14.3% from that of last year. A shipment to China, top trading partner of South Korea, climbed 7.6% to $7.64 billion US dollars. By item, export of a semiconductor is the price side, increased 10.7% from a year earlier to $6.47 billion US dollars. Chip sales accounted for 19.1% of the country's total exports over the cited period, up 2.8 percentage points from the same period of last year. In contrast, shipment of automobile went down 6.5% on year, and petroleum product plummeted even 22% to $2.2 billion US dollar. As Mr. Roy mentioned, IMF is warning global economic growth and slow to 2.8% this year from the 3.3%. But this kind of slowdown expected even in the United States was even steeper, with its economy likely to grow only 1.8% compared with 2.8% expansion in 2024. the outcome of tariff negotiation will decide the direction of Korea's industry. So, in a way, to injecting domestic fuel, that we have to prepare for the emergency plan. Rather than expanding fiscal policy, we have to think about contracting fiscal policy, and that we have to make a fine-tune of interest rate setting. Even in a series of President Trump's exposed his intention to link tariff to security, it's been a kind of a waiting game to see just how much they will impact the global economy. So for the time being, there is no treatment to recover this kind of negative trend. So we have no other choice but to wait and see.
I see. We'll just have to wait and see then. Meanwhile, then, really moving forward, a number of foreign outlets, and I'm not sure if the Spanish media outlet also covered this particular story, but there are a number of foreign media outlets in the West, meaning the US and the UK. They're citing a Korean daily for its report about China asking at least 2 South Korean transformer manufacturers, I believe, not to supply products containing Chinese-sourced rare earth metals to US defense companies. Could you tell us a bit more about this particular coverage?
Right. It seems Korea is again the shrimp between the whales, right? So what's happening is that with this trade war between US and China, apparently, according to the Korea Economic Daily, China sent letters to different industries warning them that they should not export products with rare earths that were coming from China and do not export to the US, to specifically US defense contractors. The targeted sectors by China were electric vehicles, batteries, displays, aerospace, and others. And still, from the authorities, they have not been like an official confirmation of these letters, so we have to take that into account. But as the day passes, and from the sources that are read in these articles, it does seem that some industries got these letters warning of possible sanctions if they export these products with rare earths. And why is this big? Because the defense sector in US really need this for different things, like a high-tech defense products or weaponry. And the stock that the US has in rare earths is not sufficient for a long-term basis. So they do need to get these imports for them somehow. South Korea does have a big stock of these rare earths, and that's why the US is very interested on getting them. But if China does apply this, and there's still the article mentions that there are even fears that there's a full sanction of these exports, this could be a major blow for a US defense sector.
Right, and keeping in mind what Rui has just said, Professor O, how should South Korea seek to respond to the rivalry between the US and China? That's a million-dollar question, of course.
What he just said, the balanced economic diplomacy is the answer. In retrospect, from my experience in international trade and trade diplomacy, this kind of action from Chinese government is very, very rare. We know that China produces around 90% of the world rare earths, a group of 17 elements, and the US has some rare earths, but not enough to supply its defense contractors. Chinese companies were only allowed to export the rare earths material if they obtain the special export license, which take 45 days to receive. Beijing very rarely has asked Korean company to cease exporting product containing Chinese-originated heavy rare earth metal to U.S. defense firms, warning that Seoul could face sanctions. And then I don't know how to interpret this kind of a signal, but the warning marks the first time Beijing has taken formal measures to control exports from non-American companies. The anticipated intensification of U.S.-China competition might be very, very apparent. And then to address new foreign policy opportunity and diplomatic challenge between Seoul, Beijing, and Washington in light of shifting domestic politics and geopolitical tensions, we have to make some kind of project to collaborate among these three parties. After racking my brain, I could draw down there's some kind of a project Seoul can afford to suggest a certain level of incentive-compatible cooperation, particularly in the fields such as climate change, public health, and mitigating the production and trafficking of narcotics like fentanyl. Amid this, Korea sticks to keep balance while diplomatic engagement between China and U.S. leaders are anticipated to persist even during the period of bilateral turbulences.
Right, Professor. Thank you so much for taking time to come up with that response then. I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for your insights as always, Professor O. And here in the studio, Rui, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you very much.
Right, well, that ends this week's editions of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend. See you same time next Monday.